Today we're going to talk about the unseen grind of product development coming up. Hey everybody, it's Travis Vroman. For those of you who are new to this channel, I upload videos with tips, tricks, and industry advice for game developers. So if that sounds like something that interests you, consider subscribing. So today we're going to talk about the unseen grind of product development. And what I mean by that is basically invisible work. So invisible work is exactly what it sounds like. It's all the work that you do under the hood that isn't necessarily visible in the end product. This might include things such as asset loading. It may include your networking layer. And that includes a lot of stuff, a lot more things than people realize. Some of the network layer things might include setting up a server, setting up your database, creating a login system, creating a chat system, all the underlying pieces that might be part of an online game, for example. It doesn't necessarily contribute to what is visible in the end product. Some of the invisible work that you're going to run into is going to be some of the driest work that you're going to have, and it's going to be really tough to get through. And the best way to get through it is to split it up. So you don't want to go into your project doing all the fun stuff first, because you're going to leave that grind of all that unseen work that you're not going to be able to visualize the progress of till the end. And if you do that, you're going to wind up becoming demotivated at some point. And so what my suggestion with this is that you plan out your work in such a way where you've got the invisible work that happens, and then after that you've got a little bit of the fun work or the visual feedback work that happens. So you might make some models, or you might create a game mechanic or something like that. And then you do a little bit more of the invisible work, and then you go back to the fun stuff, and you weave it in and out like that, so that you never are working on the same thing for a long amount of time. And what that will allow you to do is sort of reward yourself for getting through those tough parts of the game by allowing yourself to work on the cooler parts of the game, the parts that give you immediate and direct feedback. So this can be one of the most challenging things that you run into with game development as a whole, is all this invisible work that needs to be done. Other invisible work sometimes doesn't even include the actual game itself. It might be creating an advertising campaign, which you might think is visible work, but it's not always visible work, because there's a lot of thought that has to go into it. There's a lot of figuring out who your target audience is, and figuring out how you're going to run your ad, how long you're going to run your ad, where you're going to run your ad. Are you going to run your ad on Facebook? Are you going to use Google to do it? Are you going to try and make YouTube videos? Are you going to collaborate with other YouTubers to sort of advertise your content? And so that's not all necessarily stuff that contributes to the game on a visual level, but it's super important regardless. So perhaps the best example would be refactoring code. It's something that you always wind up having to do in any project that you ever work on. You sort of start a project thinking of one way that you're going to attempt it, and then you realize further on down the road that you need to refactor it for one reason or another. Maybe there was some edge case that you hadn't considered, or perhaps there was a flaw in your design, or maybe a misunderstanding of a requirement. Regardless, refactoring is something that doesn't move you forward. It is something that really isn't visible. It doesn't give any sort of visual indicator of progress. Refactoring can be one of the most challenging parts of invisible work, simply because you don't see what's happening. You don't move forward. You don't have visual progression on your project. It might be something like maybe you have to refactor your asset pipeline. Maybe you have to refactor your sound engine or your networking engine. All that work that you have to do doesn't really surface to the end user as having been done. In general, the longer you're working on a project, the more of that type of refactoring work you're going to wind up doing. The longer the project lasts, the more that you're adding to it, and the more that you're going to go back and say, hey, I realized that maybe I need to add this here, and that wasn't the best implementation of it. Let me go clean that up, or something along those lines. It could be really tedious, it could be frustrating, it could be boring, and it's something that you have to schedule in between all of the fun stuff in order to actually be able to get through it all. So a lot of people wind up doing a lot of the fun stuff ahead of time, and they will keep going at that, and then they'll sort of run out of that stuff. So they'll run out of game mechanics to do, or they'll run out of assets to make, or they'll run into a brick wall because something they need to be supported isn't there. And so they'll have to go and implement a feature or refactor a set of things in order to actually get that feature to work the way that it needs to work. And they'll get to that point and they'll wind up abandoning the project because that type of work isn't fun. It's not motivating. It's not something that keeps you wanting to go forward. As I said before, the best way to guard against that is to weave it into the fun work. So that's really all I've got on this topic for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already, consider subscribing, and I will see you guys later.